This interview is brought to you by people just like you. This first launch on Patreon and to YouTube members, so a big thanks to them for backing. If you would like to do so, you can go to patreon.com/SafeStatePlus or become a member here on YouTube. Welcome to another episode of Save State Plus. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Shawn Layden. Shawn, you're a storied veteran of the PlayStation universe. You ran the company. You were on the board. You did all sorts of fancy stuff over at PlayStation. And it is an absolute pleasure to have you today. How's your day going?
It's going great, Dustin. Thanks for having me on board. It's Pi Day. I don't know if this episode airs today or not, but it is Pi Day. Don't forget. 3.14.
Definitely getting some pie today, for sure. So for those who don't know, I think everybody knows, but what would you say your biggest contributions were while you were at PlayStation? I mean, I know what pops to my mind, Spider-Man, launching the PlayStation 4, but for you, what were the biggest contributions you had while there?
Well, PlayStation afforded me the opportunity to do so many different things, right? I began there in 1996, right at the Tokyo office, became a game producer without knowing what that title meant. And then laterally ended up going to Europe when we were, integrating the acquisition of Psygnosis Games, and then back to Japan to do sales and marketing for whatever crazy reason that was. Then came back to America. We started a network company, then moved over to chairman of studios. So it afforded me a lot of different opportunities to see the business and have impacts across all of it. I think the one thing I'm really proudest of, I guess, to say, would be in leadership, just trying to lead from the front, whichever team I was working with, and understanding that my job more than anything else is just to remove obstacles from the road. I'm not there to be creative. I'm not there necessarily to come up with a new business model. I'm there to take people who I trust in their vision of what they want to create or how they want to get it to market. And my job is just clearing the road. And I think most chairmen or CEOs probably feel their job in the same way.
Around that time, it was like, it was Phil, it was Reggie. There's an infamous moment where all of you are up on stage. What was that relationship like between the three titans of the industry at that time? Was it contentious? Was it friendly? Was it friendly rivalry?
I think you could call it all of the above, depending on the day, frankly. All three of us served on the board of the Entertainment Software Association. So being seen together in the same room at the same time wasn't necessarily weird for us per se. But yeah, coming on the stage at Jeff's show that one year at a time when, everybody was bringing their A game and everyone was trying to win this generation of the hardware, to come together and make a statement about the importance of gaming, that it doesn't matter where you play, it's that you have the chance to play, that you do play. I think that was a big moment. And Jeff pulled that together, I think pinging the different communications departments at the three companies. I guess the only thing that we all agreed on is either we all do it or we don't do it at all. We're going to have two people up there. We're going to have one person. Either all three of us go or it's not going to work.
Did he try and get Gabe Newell to join y'all?
I wasn't on the phone. I don't know. I just know what my people tell me.
Yeah. Who would be the PC rep of that time? Bill Gates? I don't know. I don't even know. Was Bill still at Microsoft?
Hey, we represent the console generation.
Yeah,
so.
That's fair. Out of all your memories, like that was a fun one for me. I think it was a moment of solidarity and reminded everybody that, at the end of the day, we're here to play. We're here to play great games. And it doesn't matter what console you play on or what platform you prefer. It is about solidarity as a gaming community. And I really like that moment a lot. But for you, what was during your whole career, even while you were at PlayStation and maybe after you, if you'd like to share, what was one of your favorite moments, a moment that really stood out to you as touching or special?
I guess the one that stands out about, there's plenty of times where I thought it's what a time to be alive, to be here when this thing is happening right now. I can't believe it. But probably the one that stands out all the time is walking out on the stage at E3 2016 to an 87-piece orchestra being led by Bear McCreary. To walk on stage as a full orchestra is playing, that was when we introduced God of War to the world. There's nothing that feels quite like that.
That moment has like millions of views online. I was actually in the audience for that one, and I had no idea it was coming. I'm a huge God of War fan. When I was at IGN, I did the God of War Ascension guide videos, I think. So I played that one a whole bunch and had always been a fan. What was it like for you getting to reveal that game? And you were there. So what was the feeling like for you on stage, behind stage? What was it like for the people who actually worked to make all that happen?
Well, a lot of it was informed by the fact that we had done our press conference for E3 for many years at the sports arena. And the sports arena then got torn down. I think they put a soccer pitch in there. And we had to find a new venue. And so we're shopping for venues in LA during the E3 time period, which is, as you can imagine, pretty much all spoken for when you get there. But the Shrine Auditorium was there. And the Shrine Auditorium has been around almost 100 years. Is a difficult venue to work with. People try to, they say, fight the Shrine, try to make it look modern, try to put trestles up and, scaffolding and whatnot. But we decided just to embrace the Shrine, go back to like that old 1930s musical theater flair, have an orchestra pit filled with an orchestra, bring in a singer from Iceland, having that great red curtain open up to reveal that scene from God of War. And when Kratos steps out and says he's hungry, the crowd exploded. Now, of course, Corey's up in the balcony. He's actually playing this in real time. Of course, you always expect this thing's going to crash. It's going to bug out. Something's going to happen here. And we're all on pins and needles for that. No one more so than Corey. But it happened, and he stuck the landing. And I think that reveal was probably one of the best reveals we've ever done.
Do you miss it? Do you miss, because I actually thought that
Do I miss 87-piece orchestras? The answer is yes.
No, doing the presentations at that theater, I remember it fondly. There were many shows there, and it was always really, really nice.
Yeah, it's fun. And it was a way that the industry grew up, from breaking off from CES back in the late 90s to starting E3 to having the explosion of publishers and developers and every adjunct industry coming to LA to have this extravaganza, if you will. But then it kind of outlived its purpose. It kind of became an anachronism, because when E3 began, there was no internet. When E3 began, there were magazines. Remember, kids, magazines? And you'd have to bring retailers into a trade show, and you'd have a guy say, "Hey, I'm Tony. I work with Sears. I buy Hot Wheels, Barbie, and video games. What should I be doing on the video game thing?" And you really had to educate retail about what this was. The guys from Kmart and Toys R Us and everybody, and talk to the press and try to get a cover on a magazine in September or October and that kind of thing. It really worked as a trade show in a time when it was hard to get your hands on game news unless you got a magazine once a month. Then the internet hit, and then retail exploded, and then brick and mortar became tertiary to the retail experience. Something like E3 just doesn't have a place to play in that world. We're not educating the retailers. You can't sell Christmas in June anyway, because that's too late. You got to do all your Christmas business in February. So this date in June, where everyone came together, we really started to wonder, what are we here for? Because it's not a consumer event, and it's trade, and the press, we get news 24 hours a day, 365 days a year now. So people weren't announcing things at E3. No surprise announcements, or very few anyway. Maybe God of War was one of the last ones. It just didn't evolve with the times. And do I miss it? Sure, it was fun. It was great. But as a business person, doing things like E3 just automatically eats 4 months out of your life.
Yeah.
So you have 8 months to do on business and 4 months to get all your head around E3, post and pre.
Do you feel like Gamescom has kind of picked up that torch for the in-person events?
Yeah, Gamescom and Tokyo Game Show, for that matter, they both began as consumer events. And the thing of it is, because I've done a Gamescom, and I've done a Tokyo Game Show, obviously, the way you prepare for that, the way you design for that is completely different than a trade show. You prepare for a consumer event. There's like an unspoken understanding by everybody that we have to optimize for throughput. We have to make the aisles wide. We have to make it go from Capcom to Namco to Sega, just keep them moving. But at a trade show, you design your booth more like IKEA. You get them in, but you don't let them out. You try to keep them in your own private Idaho as long as possible. So just the simple physical design of a trade show versus a consumer show, I think are completely at odds. That's why you see at Gamescom, they actually have two different messe where they do this, right?
Yeah.
And they have size and scale there, so they can pull it off. I think, in America for consumer shows, we have PAX, we have Comic-Con, we have a bunch of other small things going on. But E3, we may never see her like again.
Yeah, I don't see the use case anymore, unfortunately, but I did enjoy getting to experience it. But yeah, once the big names started pulling out, it just became less relevant in the current space.
Yeah, because back on PS1 and PS2, those generations, at any given time, I think internally we're developing 20 to 25 games across the world. And now you fast forward 20 years from that moment, and you're developing 4 games a year, if that. And at any one given time, at that arbitrary date in June, would something be ready to demo? You just never know if that's going to work out for you. Do
you feel like that change is a good thing? The fact that AAA is like so few games, the budgets have ballooned so much. How do you feel about that drastic shift in various ways?
Destin, you know how I feel about that.
No. Well, I got to get it on audio so that the audience knows.
I'm deathly concerned about it.
Yeah.
I think it's an existential threat to gaming that we see these ballooning budgets for AAA games. We find that, as the budget goes up, the risk tolerance goes to zero pretty fast. Mm-hmm. And while everyone can point to, but what about this, Shawn? That's a great success. That's a great success. Yeah, well, let me show you the buckets of not great successes, because it's huge. Yeah. And we have to, don't dwell on it. Don't dwell on the failures of the past, but definitely try to take a lesson from it. And how did you get there? And why did you do that? And how do you not do that again? And I think we're kind of trapped up against that. We either need to find a way to dial down the costs or just attack a whole new market again. What is the AA market? How does that come back to life?
Yeah. Do you see a path to some sort of new normalcy? Because I agree. I don't think it's sustainable the way AAA is going. You're talking about $300 million budgets, like long development cycles. It's like, I don't know how you have one failure. Like we saw what happened with Concord. It's really concerning when that just has a drastic dent in your war chest, so to speak. So do you see a path towards a newfound way that works or makes sense?
Well, I hope as a collective industry, we've all put our hand on the stove and found out it's hot.
Yeah.
So let's not do that again. I think there was a lot of sturm and drang and excitement around live services and games as service and recurring revenue and all of that coming out of COVID through that time period.
Yeah.
And a lot of publishers and developers got behind that and tried to get a piece of that pie. I think what we're learning over time, and maybe time was the only teacher here, that how many games as service can really be viable in the market at the same time? How many quote forever games can one person actually play? And then how do you grow a market against that? That's why we see there are some big games. You got your Fortnite, GTA Online, Apex, what have you. But it seems really hard to break into that Magnificent Seven of live service games. And a lot of people have tried. A lot of people are trying to get in there, try to get a piece of that gold from that there mountain. But you look at most of the companies who have been successful, they're kind of backed their way into it and took a great IP like Grand Theft Auto and turned it into a forever Grand Theft Auto Online. Fortnite, I'm old enough to remember when Fortnite was a $59 game.
That's right.
Right. And then as that didn't take off, that refused to get, escape velocity and started coming back in the atmosphere, they jettisoned Battle Royale out the back end. And the rest is history. Right. You can't say Epic necessarily planned to do that. I'm sure they didn't. But they moved quickly. They found a marketplace. They dived into it. I think it's difficult to look at that market and say, I'm going to build something starting right now that's going to go in there and take over that market.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
A lot of people have tried, and that's another. Yeah. That's another issue with the market is how do you get Destin to stop playing Destiny 2? Like that's the game I play every day, or I used to.
Right.
But or the Fortnite player. Like, how do you get the Fortnite player to try a different game and stick with it because you're competing for screen time? How do you get them to stop watching Invincible season 3? You know, and all of that's competing for your time.
And there's a switching cost because if you switch to another, looter shooter or hero shooter or something like that over there, and you say to your Destiny 2 friends, "Hey, come on, let's go do this thing over there," and they go, "Nah, we're not feeling it," and then you go, "Hey, I'm not feeling it either. Okay, we'll just stay where we're at."
Yeah, it's tricky. It's hard to get them.
Yeah, it's really hard. We learned that for the first time, kind of. Maybe we didn't understand at the time, but we had a game called EverQuest. You remember EverQuest?
Yeah.
Everyone was playing EverQuest. It like knocked Lord British on his ass and took over that entire MMORPG world. And then we launched EverQuest 2 because that's what you did. You have a successful game and you release a sequel. That's the nomenclature or the syntax of game releasing. But that's when we realized, oh my gosh, what we've done is we had to bifurcate the audience. Thems that would buy into EQ2 and those that were just happy living in EQ1. So you kind of diluted your impact by doing that. And then we saw what that network effect is that you won't go to this new game unless you can bring enough of your friends to go with you to this new game.
There was also the WoW effect around that time too, right?
Yeah, that was just coming up to another distraction. And that ended up sucking up that entire market and realizing that you don't ship sequels, you just do expansion packs and build off the XE.
I wonder do you think EverQuest could ever make a big comeback?
Never say never.
Yeah.
I think it would have to. I wasn't sure God of War could make a comeback, but it did.
Yeah.
From slasher hacker brawler game over there to a really a gripping narrative single player experience. So yeah, I'm sure things can come back, but I'm not quite sure how.
You've accomplished so much during your career. What's one of the hardest things you've ever managed to pull off that you were really proud of?
Well,
besides God of War.
Again, I didn't pull off any of these games. Like my job was, again, just to remove boulders in the road to make sure that the money faucet stayed turned on, at head office, and to help explain why games slip from time to time. Maybe I've heard that happen. I think one of the greatest things we did was finally got to create PlayStation Productions. We've been talking with Hollywood since the early 2000s about the viability of game IP in other linear media, i.e. film, TV. And I tell you, in the early 2000s, I got laughed out of every studio in Hollywood. People would say, "Oh, what do you mean, Pong the game? Ha, 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 get out of here." And I realized at the time, a whole generation has to retire before I can have this conversation again. And sure enough, about 15 years later, going back to the studios, we're now, it was like the same thing when comic books became a thing in Hollywood. It was because you had producers and vice presidents in Hollywood who actually read comic books as kids. So that was part of their life. So now in Hollywood, we're seeing a generation of producers and vice presidents, which are people who can push the money button, which is the most important thing, right? Who grew up with video games. They're completely immersed in that world. So for them, talking about doing a Twisted Metal TV series, doing a Last of Us TV series is pretty much natural to them. It's intellectual property, and how do we take it to this other medium? So I think creating that, finally getting that on the lot at Sony Pictures, we're really happy with that result.
What's been your favorite movie so far that Sony Pictures has made, or any of the video game movies as of late? Like the Mario movie was really popular too.
The Mario was popular.
Sonic, yeah.
Sonic, Detective Pikachu. I thought that was a riot.
Good one.
But Last of Us is where the rubber meets the road as far as how do you take that kind of a gripping game experience and translate it into television. I think Neil and Craig Mazin did a brilliant job with that.
Yeah, I got to agree on that one. I really think that one was special, but don't count out Gran Turismo. I really like the Gran Turismo movie. Neil Blomkamp, I have a bit of a soft spot because he almost made the Halo movie, but I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, that was fine.
It's no Last of Us, but yeah.
No, but it's kind of Karate Kid on wheels. So that was a fun movie.
Yeah. Good popcorn flick. So in the handheld space, we got these rumors. You got the PlayStation Portal now. You got Xbox. They're making a partner in handheld. Like that's the headlines of the last few days.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we're coming full circle, going back to the Vita, do you think it was ahead of its time? Do you think it just like wrong time, wrong place? Like what happened with that handheld? Because it's a cool handheld, but it just didn't quite catch the way it needed it to.
I guess the British would call it gilding the lily. Vita was amazing. A completely phenomenal piece of hardware. We had the PSP, which was a huge success for the PlayStation business when it came out. PSP saved my bacon when I was having trouble selling PS3s in Japan. I was selling a lot of PSPs. So, as we call it, blended margin, did okay there. But the problem with it is that it didn't have a right thumb. And we wanted, another analog stick.
Mm-hmm.
Give us another analog stick. That's what, as developers, we're craving for, and as gamers, that we're craving for. We'll do this. So came back. Vita was born. Had 2 sticks. Yay. Had an OLED screen. Okay, that's good. It's a touch screen. Okay, that's fine. And we have this rear touch mechanism where you can interact with the game from the rear. Okay, it's going to be hard to port your Game Boy game to that environment, or take this game to another handheld environment, but okay. And then we're going to have a proprietary memory card that you have to buy specially for this device. And when everyone had a kitchen drawer full of SD cards already, to introduce that was probably not fitting the market's requirements at the time, so to speak. The price point was, it was manageable. But when it came down to the software, I think some of the first generation software we created, including the studios I'm associated with, I think the tactical mistake or strategic mistake, we were trying to recreate a 10-foot experience in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Let's bring the power of the console into the handheld in a robust sort of way. And we did. The problem is I don't think consumers really wanted a console experience in their hand. They wanted an excellent handheld experience in their hand. And some of that scale didn't translate. Doing third-person shooter on the Vita was really tricky. Aiming was hard, and you couldn't see all the details of the environment, and if you're moving in a bus or even holding it close. It wasn't until later we got some real focused handheld games when we saw a lot of interest around that. I mean, I still use mine just to play Everybody's Golf. It's my perfect pick up and play game. But I think there was a mismatch. So for the content end of it, I think there was maybe too much technology in it. We could have gotten rid of a couple of things like the OLED or the back touch and maybe brought the price down for the unit instead. And I think any company, and I say this if this is where Xbox or anyone else is going, no company, with a possible exception for a few years at Nintendo, but I could even argue that one, has been successful trying to maintain a console and a handheld business at the same time. Because most companies won't launch 2 different marketing departments, 2 different sales departments to do that. So you have the same marketing budget. You've got now more product hardware to put it against, which means there's more software to put it against. And trade-offs and triage occurs. And I think most companies need to realize if you're going to have 2 hardware platforms, you really need to have 2 hardware marketing budgets. I mean, distinct and separate that are focused on just, promoting one of those or the other.
How do you feel PlayStation has done with the Portal then? Because my perspective is that when the Portal launched, I kind of wrote it off. I thought it was too expensive, didn't have the functionality I wanted. But surprisingly, they've added a lot of functionality to the device and made it more enticing. And now you can get them for like $150. Now, I know there's still like the connectivity, you need to have a subscription, and a lot of people add that caveat to it, but it has become more compelling. So how do you feel PlayStation has done, and looking forward to the rumors and what we suspect Microsoft is going to do with launching a partnered handheld, maybe an official handheld later down the line, and still doing next-gen hardware? How do you see those 2 camps playing out? And I guess we could throw the Switch too, which it's just this upgraded Switch in there. How do you feel about the 3 different strategies?
Well, I think the interesting thing with Nintendo's strategy is that, as far as I can tell, they've never named a new hardware 2. They've always given it new names: Super Famicom, N64, GameCube, Wii U, what have you. And now we're going from Switch to Switch 2. So I think Nintendo's finally realized there is a lot of brand value in the word Switch.
Yeah.
And let's keep that associated with our handheld. Let's not call it something completely different. So that's good, leaning into the brand power. For the other platforms, I'd say what I just said is that having two pieces of hardware in the market at the same time is tricky to be successful in both. The Portal, I think they did the Rise thing, which was kind of released kind of stealthy. I mean, there was some fanfare around it, but I didn't see a lot of big marketing campaigns against it. It's like, if you know kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I think word of mouth was the best accelerant. It typically is for most things anyway, but certainly Portal benefited from that, and good pickup by the press. And people found it a great compliment to being in the house, especially if you have to share a TV with somebody.
Yeah. And Microsoft, do you think they're going to be okay?
I think it's a tough road. You can ask the guys at Neo Geo how that went. A lot of devices come and go, and you have to know where your sweet spot is. Maybe now that Microsoft controls a large mobile phone game company, that they can create some first-party content exclusive to a handheld device. Maybe if they partner with some of the bigger stores or platforms, they can get some relief that way. Again, with everything, it's your proposition to the consumers. What itch are you going to scratch with that?
Yeah.
And all I'd say is, if you're trying to replicate a console experience on a 4.3-inch diagonal screen, I would advise against it.
But Steam Deck kind of has seen somewhat success.
It's pretty big.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Like bulky, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't fit in your pocket.
No.
So maybe that's the new handhelds. Really aren't handhelds.
Yeah.
They're more like small tennis bag carry thing.
Small PCs that you can put in a carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There used to be a Vile PC that looked just about the size of a Steam Deck that you open up like that. So,
yeah. And
you're right.
They had the Neo Geo Pocket, right? It's sort of similar design too. So do you think that the Nintendo Switch will eventually overtake the PS2, or do you think PlayStation's going to keep finding a million more sales every time that gets close to breaking that worldwide record?
Well, they're not being made anymore. There may be some warehouse somewhere in Ulaanbaatar which has a few of them left. I don't know. I think Switch 2 will have a lot to do with that. If that, depending on the price point it comes out at, if it's super competitive to the current market, maybe you get people switching over faster than if there's, when you have two consoles out of the same manufacturer, but the delta is more than $150, then getting people to move is hard. But yeah, well, the record's out there for the breaking. Want to take a shot for the title, go after PS2. Yes.
PS2 is one of the best consoles ever made. It's definitely one of my favorites. I mean, GTA 3 alone really, really helped it. And the fact that it had the DVD player, at the time was a big deal. And it was a really special device. What's your favorite PlayStation console ever made?
Well, my heart always belongs to the OG.
Makes sense.
And I think that's probably true. PS2 was phenomenal, and PS4 was really good to me. So I like the even numbered platforms, but certainly the OG, the original PlayStation is always going to have my heart.
Yeah, I have a lot of fond memories of my PS2. Final Fantasy 11, getting the hard drive, getting a keyboard and mouse, enticing me to finally build a PC and play Final Fantasy 11 on PC. Soul Calibur 2, I mained on PS2. It was really, really great.
Well, the most insane thing on PS2 was when they brought out the PS2 Slim.
Oh yeah,
I couldn't believe that they could, what was that? They reduced the size by 60% or something crazy like that.
Yeah, and
it was nuts.
I think the drive fail rate was addressed with the Slim model too, because there were some issues earlier on where they would die somewhat quick, but if you didn't treat it right. But yeah,
right,
yeah,
make sure it gets enough air.
Yeah, right. Speaking, that sort of reminds me of PC. People are a lot of people are having a lot of conversations about the whole PC release strategy. PlayStation's keeping it a year or two for the sort of the first parties. Like I imagine Wolverine isn't going to be coming to PC anytime soon. And if Intergalactic, I imagine, would come to console first. Xbox is day and date. Nintendo's never going to go to PC probably. Do you feel like PlayStation is going to stick to their guns on this strategy, or like 10 years from now, are we going to be all playing apps off of our television? Like what's the future look like for everybody? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, and it's the right time to ask that question, because I think when we're looking at the so-called, console wars,
yeah, they're done.
They're done. It's too bad. I saw you picked up a clip that someone else did with an interview with Peter Moore.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago. And Peter's talking about that. And, and then we had the rivalry, and there was some, smack talking, that sort of thing. But both PlayStation and Microsoft knew that there was value to that. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, boxing was at its peak when it was Ali Frazier. You have these two titans, these two sides fighting against each other.
Yeah.
And then later on, it kind of, when Mike Tyson just beat everybody he met, just kind of said, okay. So that was important in the console space. And I think what we've got to now, though, is we have two very high-end pieces of equipment, which, if you open it up, they're pretty similar under the hood. I think they both run the AMD, system on a chip or chipset that goes in there. So that's why it's very, very easy now to do multi-platform releases, where when it was Xbox 360 and PS3,
oh yeah,
you had to recode the game in order to get it run on a multi-platform. So I think that we're getting to a point where the conversations around hardware is about ray tracing and teraflops, which normal Joes understand. The jump from PS1 to PS2, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Seeing the Gran Turismo demo on PS2 just blew my mind. And then from PS2 to PS3, where we're getting into real, 1080p, 60 frames per second, we were delivering those standards. Got a Blu-ray player in it.
Yeah.
People saw that for that. PS4 was like the apotheosis of all of that, making it come together in a nicer way, on a better architecture, thanks to Mark Cerny, that people could actually code for. PS5 is extension of that, but the technical leaps are starting to plateau. Right, it's not like this anymore.
Yeah.
So, what is the future of multi-consoles? And I'll leave Nintendo's world aside because it's kind of in its own lane.
Yeah.
But, I'm old enough. I was there. I wrote the press release in one of my first jobs at Sony. Wrote the press release announcing that to enhance its video offerings, Sony is going to start manufacturing VHS videotape players. We have our Betamax lineup, but to enhance our lineup, we're going to bring in VHS. 18 months later, the Betamax lineup is gone. There was 8-track compact cassette. There was DVD and HD DVD, and all these other format wars have happened in music and in video, for decades. And then at the end, one format wins out. There's complicated licensing arrangements which allow other manufacturers to build to that standard. And the idea is, we will compete on content, not necessarily the chipset. And I don't know. It seems to me that high-end PC and Microsoft's technology and Sony's technology, they're all racing to a convergence where what is the business model going forward? Is there a consortium that comes together? Do we just license a game format to hardware manufacturers and then compete on... You have the Bang Olufsen range over here, and you have your Hitachi range over there, and everything in between. And the format holders just try to make it from a licensing perspective, and the higher margin, which are on content.
Yeah, the industry has shifted so drastically. It does leave me wondering, will anybody be happy with the next generation? Because the leap, it's going to be very hard to see. We saw it with the PlayStation 5 Pro. Yeah. Like that's a hard piece of technology to demo. And one of my videos was like, hey, here's how I would have cut the trailer to show the graphical difference. But even then, it's really, really hard to show the minutia of detail that they're trying to show off to an average consumer. So, and we've heard that, PS5 Pro is somewhat behind where PS4 Pro was. And I think part of that, obviously it's the price. That's a small part of it, but also it's what am I getting for my dollar? And I think that's harder to convey to the consumer. So when PS6 comes around and Xbox Series Next, whatever that is, I think it's going to be really hard to sell that to consumers. At least that's my take on it.
Yeah, because teraflops and ray tracing just doesn't make sexy ad copy.
Yep.
And most people don't understand it. And, like I say, ray tracing is great, but if your dining room window is open and any sunlight's hitting off your TV, you're not seeing your ray tracing.
Yeah. And if it hits just right, you're also dipping your frame rate down to like 20 frames per second. We spoke a little bit about this, but there have been a lot of notable departures at Sony. Jim Ryan's out, Price, Shuhei. Are we watching the end of the era? And how do you feel about the new leadership team? Like, what challenges are they going to face? Do they have a hard road ahead?
Well, I think the road ahead is challenging for all the reasons we've been discussing on this cast until right now, Destin.
Yeah.
I think if you look at it, we got in the game business back in 94. I joined in 96. Anyway, you slice it, that's 30 years ago. So
I was 14 in 96.
Yeah. And I was 31 or something, I guess.
A couple of kids.
But add 30 years to that, and this generation is cycling out. I'm what you would call in the retirement window, and Shu is not a spring chicken, and Ted's been at it for a long time, and if anyone deserves his chance to sit under his tree, it's Ted Price. So, it's a natural changing of the guards, if you will.
I got to ask you about Insomniac. How did that deal come together? How did you get Spider-Man? I'm sure you've told the story, but I haven't heard it. And Insomniac, just full disclosure, they're one of my favorite developers of all time.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I think their games are absolutely phenomenal from a technical perspective, from a gameplay perspective. They've really mastered the craft. So what was it like? Did you know what you got when the Insomniac came over there and then you got them Spider-Man?
Well, I've been a fan of Insomniac since they made Disruptor.
Yeah.
One of the first games they did. And then we worked together very closely on Spyro the Dragon. I was in Japan at the time, and they were localizing the content for the Japanese market. Latterly, I was in Europe, and they came out with Ratchet and Clank. We got behind that heavily. They've been an external developer partner for PlayStation for almost the entire existence of PlayStation, 25, 30 years. So working with them more deeply on whether it's another Ratchet and Clank or whether at this time it was Spider-Man was for us kind of business as usual. We've been working on them forever. It only became different when the discussions began about would they want to be part of PlayStation Worldwide Studios. And I think for them as well, it was a good time in their evolution to get into a relationship with a strong partner that they've known for 25 years. There was no surprises in that relationship. Mm-hmm. And to create, a secure environment for the future of Insomniac in a world where, getting games off the ground now is a community effort. The days of one studio showing up with an almost complete game looking for a licensing deal, that's over. You need a publishing power. You need a good developer to get into the AAA space at all. So it was the right time for PlayStation Studios. It was the right time for Insomniac.
And how did the Spider-Man deal come together?
At that time, I was still in the network business at Sony Network Entertainment. So I wasn't involved in those conversations. But as I understand it, Marvel was looking for a developer to build the next Spider-Man game. Movies and game tie-ins, one of the mistakes that most people made in the early 21st century is try to get a day and date. Movie and game.
Yeah.
And that never works. Never. The game is always terrible because the timelines for production are different. green light in movies is you green light on one day and you can be a final cut in 9 months. In games, you green light on one day and you got to wait 3 years. So getting those two timelines to match up is frankly a fool's errand. And so after a while, I think Marvel felt that we need to build a great Spider-Man game, not connected necessarily to a movie, but just that is true to the spirit, true to Peter Parker, true to that experience, and who we want to work with. And they were speaking with us. And, at one time, way back in the past, when we had Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon, those are Universal properties. We built them up into very valuable things, and then they went back to Universal. Mm-hmm. And people always say, why doesn't Sony do more Crash games? Well, because we don't have the rights to it. Mm-hmm. But we built all that brand value. So for the longest time after that, in the studio, and myself personally, very reluctant to sign licensed IP, because what I didn't want is to use our outreach, our brand, our power to create IP value for something somebody else's owns. Mm-hmm. Don't use my platform just to make value for yourself, even though it'll be a great game, what have you. But just the energy around that, building brand value for another person, didn't seem an equitable exchange to me. Mm-hmm. Now, welcome Spider-Man into the conversation. What I didn't know at the time was it is the most valuable superhero out there. Full stop, period.
Yeah.
Not Superman, not Batman, not Captain America, not Iron Man. Spider-Man, on a global basis, is the most valuable superhero IP across comic books and merch and movies and everything else. So I can look at that and go, well, I guess Marvel's not leveraging us for more, more brand value.
Yeah.
They seem to have max XP across all those categories. So we'll just come together as equals. They're the best in their business and we're the best in ours. And bring that together, see if we can do something amazing. And at the time, Insomniac was open. They'd finished their most recent Ratchet and they jumped to the idea. They just loved the thought of working with that character and the worlds they could create. And I would be the first to say they were incredibly successful at it.
Were you disappointed about the reflections in the puddles, or did you feel like they landed on a good spot at launch with that? Because that was a big deal online.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are a big deal online. There's a lot of stuff that's a big deal online. Yeah. The puddles were just fine.
Good. We got you on record.
Yeah.
We sort of talked about it already. Were you surprised to see that PlayStation is being a little bit more aggressive with PC? And do you think they're going to keep the gap, or do you think that it's going to get closer to day and date?
So to put clarity on this, the PC outreach was part of my business plan, a few years ago, back in probably 2017, 2018. The idea around that being that, there is a hardcore class of gamers who have no interest in consoles. They have spent their time and their money building out their rig, and that's what they want to have the gaming experience. Mm-hmm. So I felt that if we're also looking at taking our IP into other areas, whether film or television, that getting as much awareness about the characters and the worlds and the brands is good for the wider, IP business we're thinking about. So how do I get PC gamers to learn about my games? Because they won't come to me. I have to go to them. Mm-hmm. I have to go where they are. And they're on their PC. So we decided to make our games on PC. Not day and date. It's not going to compete with the uplift that the business gets every time a first-party game comes out. That's part of the compact between the hardware business and the software business, that the software business will be there to support you. But certainly after 1 year or 9 months or 10 months, the decay curve on sales is down. Mm-hmm. You had a couple of repromotes, maybe popped it a few times with a price drop. But it's effectively a non-performing asset anyway. So why don't we make a PC version? Not because it's a race for Money Mountain, because there's not a whole lot of money there. It's significant, but a lot. But more to the point, get people who would otherwise not see our games, get them a chance to see it. Well, then you're going to try to make them buy a PS6. Well, if you want to, please. But what I want you to do is have an understanding of our characters. So when you see them happening in a film or in a TV show or something over there, you might say, hey, yeah, that was kind of a cool game experience I had with that character in that world. Maybe I want to see more. It's just to shake the tree and get more people to see it. It wasn't a grand, how do we take over the PC business strategy?
I like that. It's more about just sharing the experience of gaming of the amazing games that PlayStation makes with more people. It's not the quote that Shuhei gave where he's like, "It's easy money," or whatever. But I'll take it. It's more player centric.
There is some strategy behind it.
Yeah, yeah.
There is. And then when you look at something like a Helldivers game, anything that is, a live action,
always online type,
online game, always online type of game, that means you have to crank the funnel open.
Mm-hmm.
And on one platform alone, it's not enough. And so PlayStation and PC to get more people into the experience is a reasonable accommodation, I think.
Yeah, makes sense. One thing that happened under your watch that I really appreciated as a Destiny player, cross-platform play. That happened while you were there. That was a big deal for me and anybody in the Destiny community for a long time. We just wanted to play with our PlayStation friends. Like by Destiny 2, I was mainly on PC. I was mainly on PlayStation for all of Destiny 1, and I would play a little on Xbox, but we just wanted to play together. How did you sell it? Because for so long, PlayStation was really resistant to that idea.
I think as a management team, we finally got over the hill on that when we realized we're like King Canute out there at the water's edge trying to stop the tide from coming in.
Yeah.
It's coming, people. And either we just get on board with that idea or we get the undertow. So we made a decision to do it before we announced it, obviously, but we had more time after the decision was made because it's not just cross-platform. There's two other aspects. It's not just cross-play. There's two other aspects. There's cross-purchase and cross-progress, right? And so how are we going to deal with all of that? It's not just that you can play with your friends, but if you bought your hat over here, you want to wear the hat you bought in this instance of the game, which includes people on platforms where that hat is not available.
Yeah. I want my Kratos skin on my Xbox game,
right.
And I want my Master Chief on my PlayStation Fortnite round. Yeah.
So it took a while to work that out.
That makes sense.
And cross-purchasing too, you don't want to create a world where one platform can just arbitrage all of the DLC on this platform, all DLC is 80% off to get people to buy it over there, but forcing all the other platforms to also support that purchase. So there were a lot of business ins and outs around it that took time to nail out. But in the end, it's the right thing to do. It's the right place to be. And I'm glad we got that over the line.
Yeah, that sounds like a messy, tangled web that I would not envy anybody having to figure out from a business perspective. Like it's tricky, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. But I think we got in the right place. You're a Destiny player. You seem to be happy with it. So
yeah, it was great. It was really, really great. Can you tell me a little bit more about your departure? It seemed like you were in your prime, and then you decided to depart. Could you tell me a little bit more about why you made that decision or how that came about?
Yeah, it was at the end of 2019, and I've been associated with the launch of at least 5 or 6 platforms for the company. If you include VR, you include the handheld platforms. We're coming into the run-up to launch PS5. And, there's a certain exhausting song and dance that goes with every platform launch. We had just delivered our big PS4 games. I think Ghost of Tsushima was just around the corner to come out. And there were some other...
That game did okay.
Yeah, I think so. And you can pet the fox.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the company was making some strategic decisions about where they wanted to take the platform in the future, with a heavy emphasis in games as service, live service gaming, subscription formulas, recurring revenue, whatnot. And that was kind of not my wheelhouse. I just make things like God of War and Spider-Man and Last of Us and Uncharted and Horizon. I didn't have the vision or the energy to try to, take it to this new area of live service gaming. So all that considered, it seemed like a good time to step down after 32 years at Sony.
Yeah, it's a good run.
Yeah, I think I paid my dues at the office.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was going to step right into another gig. I was kind of looking at something, and then 6 weeks later, the world stopped.
Yeah.
And I was in COVID like everybody else, except I didn't have to work from home because I wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And after COVID came and went, I realized that probably my corporate office days are well done now. And maybe I can just use this time to work with smaller teams, work with companies that are outside the field. I do a lot of work with Girls Make Games. This is my shout out to everybody who's catching the video. Check out Girls Make Games Scholarship Fund online. We're doing a lot of good work to help young women between the ages of 8 and 16 to learn coding. And every year we're taking about 3 scholars and give them scholarships in computer science engineering. So it's a worthy cause. Please get out there for my nonprofit.
That's great.
And then I'm here talking to you. I was at DevCom in Lisbon last month, talking to developers there about about how do we change the business model? How do we change the route to market? We've been making and selling games pretty much by the same pattern for the last 40 years, and it doesn't work that way anymore. Simple things like 70-30. What does that mean?
Yeah.
In a world where I don't know if you're getting 30% value from your publishing partner, to be honest. So, yeah, it's a hell of a time to be alive, and I think a lot of people are out there looking for ways to change the model, unless we all blow up into this huge, overly priced AAA space where everybody just burns down the house.
I think Xbox has been one of the leaders in terms of shaking up how things are done day and date on PC. You've been critical of Game Pass. We don't agree on that particular topic, but would you agree they're one of the first that are really doing things quite differently from how anybody else had? I understand that they're probably doing that because they're in third place, but do you think they're going to see success? Like, how do you feel about all that?
Well, I think every innovation, if you've got the gumption and the vision and the resources to try it out, please do, because we're all looking for a new model. The role of the publisher or the role of the movie studio or the role of the record label. These have all transformed in the last 10 to 15 years. We have more direct-to-consumer, digital outreach and ability to speak to your consumers, outside the realm of your publisher and outside the realm of your movie studio. So the relationship between the creator and the player, I think, gets closer now. And how do we continue to abet that and help that relationship grow rather than keep trying to keep things into here's a developer, here's a publisher, here's a market kind of thing. Xbox is trying new stuff. Yes, you and I are not in agreement about the efficacy of Game Pass.
And to be clear, you think it's a non-starter. It's not profitable enough to work from a financial perspective, right?
Yeah. It doesn't math out. And people say, yeah, but Microsoft makes money. The platform, like the casino, will always make money. The house always wins.
Mm-hmm.
But I see these subscription platforms only for putting games on an all-you-can-eat sort of surface. I don't think it does well for the developer. I think most game developers who are really in it to win it are not looking at having the development costs covered, because that's just wages, right?
Mm-hmm.
You pay me so much an hour and I build you a game and it's all yours and I walk away from it. Real developers want to be able to get into overages, get into profit sharing, shoot the moon, try to make the big nut. And the pennies you get off of a subscription platform is not going to get you there. Ask any of your musician friends, how many people bought a Ferrari with their Spotify check? Nobody. So those models don't necessarily work well, I believe, for the game developers. For the platforms, yeah, you can make it work at the platform level.
One of the things that's just something for me to chew on, but one of the things from the PlayStation 4 era that I didn't want to miss was the infamous "This is how you share PlayStation games" video. What a brutal start. Well, first of all, great video, right? It was funny. Like, everybody laughed. Everybody got
nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with me. I was a spectator. I loved it too.
But what a brutal start for Xbox One. It comes in at a higher price point. It has a convoluted system for sharing games that people aren't ready for. And then you put this video. It was fun. It was fun. It was jabby. It was definitely that console warrior vibe that you sort of talked about, the ribbing of each other and sort of pushing each other forward. But do you think PlayStation has lost a little bit of that fun characteristic it used to have?
Well, I'll say about that commercial, that little ad drop we did with Adam and Shu is genius. It's like, don't give Steph Curry the open lane, man. That's an easy shot if you want to take it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of the great things about PlayStation, back in the day when we began in 1994, is the company began in Japan as a joint venture between Sony Electronics, because they had the CD drive all ready to go, and Sony Music, because Sony Corp guys knew enough that they appreciated that their electronics engineers guys aren't going to be able to build a game business because it's entertainment. It's in the name, Sony Computer Entertainment. Mm-hmm. So they brought the music guys in, and they did sales and marketing and A&R and advertising. All the fun bits from the music side, which is why the way we brought games out on PlayStation 1 was different than what Sega and Nintendo were doing. We were bringing out games like they were song releases, and we were promoting developers like they were rock bands. And the advertising was so obtuse as to be almost incomprehensible, which made people curious, what the hell is that? The ad campaigns in the early 2 or 3 years, in America and Europe as well, was all around this mystery, and like, if you have to ask, you're not supposed to know. And it just drew people in. The "You Are Not Ready" campaign they had in the States for PlayStation. The British campaign about the Society Against PlayStation. Oh gosh, some really crazy ads back then. We had a whole series by David Lynch, God rest his soul.
Yeah.
It was crazy stuff. And I think maybe, as you get older, it's harder to keep your crazy alive.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping a new generation of leadership sweeping into PlayStation and Sony should. I hope they help reconstitute that sense of that renegade air that we had.
As a dad of two, I feel that it is hard to get fired up when you just want to take a nap most of the time.
Which is why guys like me had to step down. With a beard like this, I was just waiting to release a bad game. So.
I know we're coming close to the end of our time. I did have some patron questions I wanted to get to. We can sort of do them quick if you need to go soon. Dan asks, what do you think of Xbox putting their games onto PlayStation? That's a big shift.
It's a big shift, but we've seen it before. I was licensing games when I was in London back in the early 2000s. And one day I was publishing Sega games on PlayStation 2. And we were doing PS2 versions of Daytona and Rez and the Dolphin game named
Echo.
Echo the Dolphin, yes. Yeah. And Space Channel 5. We helped bring that onto PlayStation through partnership with Sega. And Sega, Dreamcast was just ahead of its time, seriously ahead of its time. But they became a very successful third-party publisher, super strong, one of the best in Japan. And no, I'm not surprised Xbox is on PlayStation. It's kind of the way that goes.
Are you saying they're going third party?
I'm not going to say anything because that's up to Phil to decide.
Yeah.
But I think if you have under your wing the entire forces of Bethesda and Activision Blizzard and the other studios you've bought up over time, you would be a really strong third-party publisher. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I hear that. Adam asks, with the exceptional growth in indie games, do you foresee whether that and free-to-play games will eventually be the new normal in the industry, as opposed to studios making and taking risks on AAA budget games? He continues, will publishers reach a point where the latter cohort, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, will be the focus for publishers in the games industry? So sort of a two-parter.
That's like a three-parter.
Yeah, this is a loaded one, Adam.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah. Was that Adam Boyce?
No.
I'm sorry, what was the first part of that question?
So the first part was, do you think that free-to-play games will eventually be the new normal in the industry, as opposed to these big AAA risks?
In certain categories, free-to-play is already the new normal. Certainly on mobile platforms. I mean, that's the way to go. It's tough to do premium business there. There are some on console that can be successful there. I think they will continue to be successful there. I'm looking at what they call triple I now, like really high-end indie stuff.
Yeah.
And is that indistinguishable from what we used to call double A? back in the days when you had THQ and Interplay and Crave and Gremlin and Ocean and, the list goes on. That category of gaming, I don't think is being well served. And that's the category that brings variety. And that's what we're missing right now. I think we're getting too much monotonal in the different offerings we have. I was at DICE a couple of weeks ago and having a conversation with a person of my boomer cohort. And what she said to me was, what I really miss, Shawn? I said, what is that? I miss finishing games.
Yeah.
I really used to like completing that dopamine hit I'd get when I read final boss and I won. It's like so uplifting. But now with either forever games or games that have 100 hours of gameplay, we're just not finishing games anymore. We have to look back and think about what that really means. I mean, if you walked out of halfway through Star Wars, would that be okay?
Yeah.
From George Lucas's perspective? From a development management or publisher point of view, I look at statistics like something like 35% of players see the end of your game, if that. And all that money I spend on the last level of that game, which most people didn't see. We need to take 2 steps back and ask ourselves, are we doing this right? Are we still doing this right? Is there another way to do that? Another thing we came across when I was at DICE was talking about this very same problem about variety in gaming, that on PS1 and PS2, you've heard the expression that necessity is the mother of invention, right? We came up with something like, but constraint is the father of creativity. PS1, think about it. 770 megs of compact disc storage.
We got Metal Gear.
2 megs of RAM
yeah.
on board. Maybe it does 480p, maybe, I don't know. But you had all those constraints, draw distance, that's why you had so much fog in games, right? But you're just battling the constraints of the hardware, which made for some very clever game designs that came out around that. Now the hardware is not the impediment. If anything, it's the fact that the power scales to infinity that leaves you with these massive worlds like, wow, I can make a world now where, see that mountain? We can walk there. Okay. Well, why would I want to walk there?
Yeah.
But we can. Okay. But why do I care? So, yeah, I think the AAA going to AA kind of gaming sector is where I want to see a lot of attention to. And I think for that matter, the problem with indies have is discovery. You go to the Steam store, what did
40 games came out in the last hour.
What did Rutger Hauer's character say at the end of Blade Runner? It's like tears and rain. That's what these indie games got into Steam, and it's tears and rain.
Yeah.
So is there a way that we can create more indie collectives? I like the stuff that Ben Cavallo is trying to do with Midwest Games, trying to create an association, a federation amongst a number of different smaller titles. If we can create, if not a brand around it, at least a presence around it, so that we're not all of us knocking on people's doors with one game in hand, but there are a few of us together trying to get seen. Is there a way to change the business model that way?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking forward. I'm hoping for. And the last part of that question from Adam.
Will the new generation be a focus for the publishers of the industry?
Well, it has to.
Yeah.
And even today, I think we're missing it. Even today, we're looking at, 15-year-olds are this, that, other thing. 15-year-olds in 2015 are not 15-year-olds in 2025. They're not. And I think marketers and publishers are slowly adjusting to that reality.
Yeah. Eric says, you were with Tencent for a while, and he was asking some questions about Tencent. What do you see their long-term vision being, if you can talk about it? I don't know if there's contracts or something, but they've been pretty on the mark in terms of their releases, and they've been investing in Remedy, Larian from Software. Do you think they'll do a Game Pass? I think I know the answer to that one, but what do you think they're up to over there?
So I was an advisor for Tencent for about a year, a little bit more than a year, and that wrapped up about a half a year ago or more. So I really couldn't speak to any of their movements today. But what I will say from my experience with them, they're super professional, had really good data, really good market segmentation of what they're looking to go for. A lot of success in China with their mobile games. I think they're taking a very measured movement into the market. It may have slowed down a little bit, but I think that's more like everybody trying to watch and listen and find out where this thing is going. But yeah, they'll be in it for a while, and I think they're largely a force for good, and how they're helping other studios get some funding that they need or get some exposure that they need.
They back Grinding Gear, right? Grinding Gear Games?
Possibly. I don't have any data on that.
Oh, well, a lot of good companies that they're backing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go quick. In retrospect, do you believe that paying? You have something else coming up, right? Just to be clear, I don't want to rush if I don't have to.
No, I'm good.
Okay. So MJS, in retrospect, do you believe that paying for game exclusivity and exclusive content on PlayStation was the right decision? He really gets into it. He says, from both a moral and industry-wide perspective, did it bring any specific benefits to players, such as helping to fund a struggling studio or launching an indie hit? So on the one hand, asking about the morality of game exclusivity. On the other hand, was there a positive benefit to having that exclusivity?
I think there's a positive benefit to that exclusivity. It was what drove the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 markets. When Sony got in the business back in 94, Sony knew that the company, being new to the gaming space, with producers like me, who didn't know what they're doing, working there, they had to be third-party friendly. The success of PlayStation would not be based on PlayStation games in the 90s. It'd be based on, can you get FF7 guys to abandon Nintendo and come onto PlayStation? Can you be the platform for games like Resident Evil, which had never been seen before, survival horror kind of games? So Sony did, and then Tekken and Ridge Racer, because the law was you can't launch a platform without Tekken and Ridge Racer. So those exclusives were crucial to getting PlayStation some altitude, because there's no way PlayStation could build their way against the Sonic Empire and build their way against the Mario Empire. PlayStation had to be the people's platform, if you will, and allow other parties to come there and be successful. So I think what we did, particularly in Japan, to bring people exclusively to the platform was strategic and important. And we replicated that model in the US and in Europe. But at the time, let's be honest, PlayStation 1, there were so many games coming out. I mean, we talk about exclusivity, but the first party games, which are by definition exclusive, never held more than 20 or 22% of the software market for PlayStation games. Unlike Nintendo, which routinely has 80 to 85% of their software market, or at the time, Sega had a huge slice of their software market. So I think buying the exclusives were important to give some throw weight to the PlayStation community. I don't think there's a moral question around that.
It's just business.
It's business, and it's to make yourself stand out. It's like everyone wants to have features other people don't. And some companies that did exclusive deals, had they not done that deal, that game maybe didn't get made because no one else was putting money out there to get them. So I think net, it's a positive, but no studio has to be exclusive. You can choose your own adventure. But now today, more platforms are doing multi-platform, and that's largely because it takes that much addressable market to make back your $250 million investment. Yeah. There's more risk taking. It was a bit more fun when it only cost $5 million to make a game.
Yeah, right. A little bit different at that time.
Yeah.
If you could eliminate one trend in the gaming industry from the last 20 years, which one would it be? What's a trend you don't like that you want to see go away?
Well, that sounds elitist, because every trend is a trend for a reason. It's a trend and I don't like it. It's all the toxicity that still comes with the online chat in game. You know, it's like, people grow up, please. When you're in your Fortnite sesh or your Call of Duty sesh, we're all gamers. We're trying to have a good time.
Yeah.
Let's not go into that crazy, very ignorant place of screaming epithets down a wire to strangers you have never met before.
Yeah. Can we bring it down like 75% a little bit?
Yeah. Can we just end with good game, guys? Can we do that? Go back to that?
Yeah. That one is still, it's surprising that it's still as rough as it is. Usually my experiences are pretty good, thankfully. But every once in a while you hop in a COD lobby and it's not the most pleasant. We'll just say that.
Yeah. So that's a trend I'd like to see go away.
We'll jump over to Emod, who asks, would Shawn ever work at Xbox to help it become better?
Again, never say never, but I think my best days are behind me.
Got it. What do you think Xbox should do to become better than PlayStation? He asks. How would that even? I don't know.
I don't know what the measurement of that would be. I think
they're different. I don't know.
I think they're but if you're a third-party publisher, which they are now, if you own ABK and Bethesda and the other studios they bought, Team Ninja, you've got to look at those studios. What do those studios need to be successful? It's really not what your hardware needs. It's what do those studios need? And if they need multi-platform exposure to substantiate the cost of the games, then make that happen for them. I think the imbalance or the huge amount of development resource that they have, I think in my view, you have to focus your lens on that survivability and that success metric. And how do we make those studios stronger than strong? And if it fits whatever your hardware ambitions might still be, that's great. But not the other way around.
Well, I got to ask you, should they buy Ubisoft? There's a rumor going around that Ubisoft shopping around. If those IPs, if you were at Xbox, those IPs come to your door, or PlayStation or wherever, do you jump at that opportunity?
I love Ubisoft. I love Eve, and we worked with them way back in the day on Rayman.
Yeah,
bringing that to PlayStation.
Very popular game.
Very popular game. Huge development resource on hand there. It's a massive undertaking. All I'll say is this: when I left Sony as chairman of Worldwide Studios, I think with Insomniac, it was 14 studios that were in our constellation of development activities. I look at the number that are already under the umbrella at Microsoft. We look at what happened in Scandinavia with Embracer, and how they reached explosive output at one point. Hey, if Microsoft feels they could do something effective with it, good luck. But I think there comes a time when it's just too big to manage. Yeah,
you think it might be the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, like one too many.
Hey, I topped out at 14. So I don't know. I can't imagine what like 30 something or 40 something looks like.
Yeah, I get that. iMatt says, what does game ownership look like in the future for gamers? That's a good question. With physical games going the way of the dodo and streaming subscription services on the rise, is there any hope for a digital ownership movement? That's a good question.
That's a good question. One, and it's right in the zeitgeist right now. As you see, your downloaded games are not telling about your rights as an owner, but your entitlement as an accessor, or you have access to this game until you don't. And it brings up interesting questions. We see those questions happening in the streaming video world as well, where some HBO things I watched, and now they're no longer listed on the HBO site, but I want to watch them, but there's no Blu-ray alternative.
Yeah.
Does that IP even exist anymore? There have been crazy stories about with this kind of delisting of stuff from the streaming services. There's been a rise in torrent activity, right? If I can't play the Blu-ray and I can't stream it over here, is pirating it bad? If it's not available commercially anywhere, that's a question. As far as gaming, I think ownership is important. I think physical gaming is still going to be with us for a while. But what does that mean when you have your digital download on your hard drive, and essentially they can just turn a key on server side and you're no longer in that game anymore? We have to begin to deal with that. One of the things I'm working with is there a way using blockchain technology? Don't worry, this is not going to turn into a Web3 conversation.
All right, enough.
Settle down, Destin. Settle down. But just in the way that using a smart ledger, if you can track the ownership permissions for one executable, you have a game, you sell it to me. There's an open ledger which says you no longer possess rights to access that code, and now I do because I bought it from you, and I paid you $10, and of that, some percentage goes back to the original game developer. That's the one thing about used games you never liked in the physical world, is that GameStop could sell that copy of Twisted Metal 10 times, but the originator only saw the first sale. So using a digital platform where you can actually provide a subsidy or a residual payment, a residual to the game creator as it gets sold down the line from person to person, I think that's a good future. I mean, right now you can't sell your digital music library either, because we can't assign who has permission to see it and who has lost permission by selling it. So I think technology can begin to answer that question, and that'd be great, because then we can create our own marketplaces. We don't have to go through in-game markets to sell items for Warcraft or sell items for Destiny. That would open up new opportunities, definitely.
That's actually a compelling argument for blockchain. I've been very anti all of that, but that actually, like ownership, that kind of makes sense, actually.
Yep.
Yeah. Shawn, I think a nice question to end on would be a really simple one. What's your favorite game and why? As my son is upset. Mom's with him. Don't worry.
There's so many. I love all my children from the PlayStation world. But I think the one game that had the biggest impact on me, which made me a gamer, and I began with pinball and skee-ball, so I'm not completely out of the woods. But when I first played Prince of Persia on a Mac 2, that was transformative. I couldn't believe games like that, were possible. And the way Jordan coded it, and the rotoscoping of the animation of the character, we've never seen that before. We've seen, hop, 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 pixelated characters. Here's the prince climbing over a wall. Leap in the bridge shall appear. All these great memes in the gaming industry began right there with Prince of Persia. And that'll always be my favorite game.
That's a really good answer. It just brings back memories of how that game worked, Karateka and Another World and Out of This World. Those games that started playing with that technology were really special. And those were the kind of leaps that we saw in the industry that really got people excited. And I hope we do see those more of that in the future.
Yep. I think we need to get the gatekeepers out of the way and let the creators build business models that work for both the player, the seller, the creator. Everyone has to be happy with the deal. There's too many deals, I think, that are lopsided out there, which leaving one side of the business quite unhappy. And that doesn't bode for a happy future. So yes, let's try the new era in game making.
Shawn, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. You have a nonprofit that you plugged during the episode, but one more time, or anything else you would like to discuss. But I thought that was an important one that you might want to bring up again.
It is. There's a woman named Layla Shabir, and about 15 years ago, she started a program called Girls Make Games. And that's where they go in the summertime. They create boot camps at participating studios. We used to do that at PlayStation studios. And they bring 30 or 40 young women together. And in 30 days, they make a game demo. They break into teams. Someone's a coder, someone's the artist, someone's a music person. And they actually do that collectively. And it's had such an impact. The girls keep coming back every year. Now they have them old enough to go to university. We're working on scholarship programs for them. But it's important to me because the gaming industry and my career there is built up with largely people that look like me. I'm half Asian and I'm half Caucasian. And I'm male. So that's like the entire gaming developer community. With programs like Girls Make Games, I think we can bring new voices, new outlooks. The games they design on spec during these boot camps are amazing. They're things I wouldn't have thought of as a game concept. So the last thing I'll say is the thing I say at all of my presentations is to get more people playing games, which we all want, we need to get more people making games. And they can't be the usual suspects that have been making games for the last 30 years. We need new voices. We need new game makers. And Girls Make Games, look it up, people. Please support us. We have a scholarship fund, which will also take your donations. Is trying to address just one small component of that, how to get more women into computer coding for games.
Shawn, that sounds like a worthwhile cause. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you so much
Thanks for the opportunity, Destin.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I do really appreciate it. And if you're watching or listening, thank you so much. And we'll catch up for the next one. Bye for now, everybody.
Thank you, Destin.
Thank you. This interview is brought to you by people just like you. This first launch on Patreon and to YouTube members, so a big thanks to them for backing. If you would like to do so, you can go to patreon.com/SafeStatePlus or become a member here on YouTube.